This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's Electric Cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Thank you for watching this week's NC Spin. We promise some great discussion, starting with our panel's analysis of the recently adjourned legislative session, especially the 6 proposed constitutional amendments. We'll look ahead to the November elections by discussing the judicial filings and talk about, if we have time, the Friday firing of 40 DPI employees. And of course, it wouldn't be NC Spin if we didn't ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Speaking of the panel, let's introduce you to this week's panel. They include Rob Schofield, we welcome back after too long an absence, the director of NC Policy Watch, Phil Kirk, former secretary of many agencies of state government and the former chair of the State Board of Education, Cash Michaels, one of our favorite journalists and filmmakers, and John Hood, the syndicated columnist and author. We begin our uninterrupted debate after these brief messages from our underwriters.
From treating the newest member of your family to helping a loved one make end-of-life decisions, your family physician is with you every step, for every stage of life, for every member of your family. Despite a healthcare landscape fraught with potential landmines, family physicians across North Carolina are providing you a lifetime of committed, dependable medical care. Family physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Quality of life enjoyed by North Carolinians comes from the sacrifice of our state and local government retirees. These men and women risked their lives in times of danger. They taught our children, kept our neighborhoods clean, and protected the state's resources. They are North Carolina's silent heroes. The North Carolina Retired Governmental Employees Association proudly serves as the voice for more than 300,000 retirees across North Carolina. Our retirees deserve no less, and every day we stand by them.
Agriculture. It's North Carolina's #1 economic driver. It puts people to work. It powers our economy. And as agriculture grows, so does our quality of life. North Carolina Farm Bureau is proud to support agriculture and our farmers because agriculture connects us all.
Let's get to it. Temperatures and tempers soared a bit, but the legislature adjourned just before July 1st, and we want our panel to discuss what they accomplished, failed to accomplish, and especially the 6 constitutional amendments they left for us to vote on in November. I want to ask each of you what you thought was the best thing our legislature did and what was the worst during this short session.
Well, believe it or not, both of mine have to do with education. I thought the positives were they continued to invest in education, over $700 million new dollars, 6.5% average raise for teachers, 7% for principals. They paid some attention to state employees, particularly corrections officers, troopers, highway patrol, and so on. The worst thing they did, in my opinion, was not expanding early childhood education programs, taking some federal money and I thought supplanting it from what I've read and heard. So.
Rob Schofield, best and worst.
Boy, from my perspective, it was a dreadful session, and I suppose the fact they didn't declare martial law or suspend the Constitution was a positive. But I think there was a good thing they did. A good piece of bipartisan legislation was that they passed this certificate of relief legislation that gives people seeking second chances, people with criminal records, multiple convictions in the past, gives judges some discretion to help clean up their records so they can rent an apartment, get a job. That was good bipartisan legislation. If I had to pick among the long list of horribles, I'd say the failure to expand Medicaid. It still assures that another 1,000 or so people will die prematurely in North Carolina next year.
John Hood, best and worst.
I agree with Rob's positive about the certificate, but I would add, to be boring and repetitive, I am most appreciative of the fact that they put additional money into savings, into the rainy day fund, into some other reserves. They at least started thinking about the long-term tens of billions of dollars of liability for retiree health benefits. They have a long way to go to take that seriously, but at least they're paying attention to it for the first time ever, really. for a General Assembly. The negative, in my view, there were several, but the biggest one for me is enacting a budget in the way they did. They did it through a conference report. There was no way to amend it. It just didn't follow the procedure that I think the legislature should always follow in making the most important decision it makes every year, which is to appropriate funds.
Good open government. Cash Michaels, best and worst.
Please allow me to flip them. The worst thing that this Republican-led legislature did during this short session was come to town. The best thing they did altogether now was leave town. All right?
Well, there are some people, Cash, who say that this session was historic in the fact that it was a massive attempt to grab power from the executive branch and transfer it back over to the legislative branch, perhaps historic in that respect. Would you agree or disagree with that?
It wasn't a massive attempt, it was a crime. That's what they did. And they did it shamelessly. They feel that no matter who the governor is, these lawmakers believe, Republican lawmakers in particular, believe that they are the ones that drive the wheel when it comes to North Carolina, and forever it shall be. And I don't think people are comfortable with that at all.
Phil, your former boss, Jim Martin, wrote a wonderful op-ed piece that was in the Charlotte Observer, and he said it was the legislature's job to pass laws, not run government, but that's exactly what they were attempting to do. Let's go to some of these constitutional amendments. Let's take the one, first of all, with voter ID, because that probably got the most media play. Why is this one going to be different than the one that the court struck down?
Well, they haven't put all the ways that it's going to be implemented into the bill, for one thing. I think that's the key difference. I think that one will pass relatively easily. 33 other states have some form of voter ID, and you get around the voter ID by doing an absentee ballot.
Okay, but I mean, is it fair for us to vote on a voter ID bill when we don't know what the voter ID is going to be?
I wouldn't have done it that way. I would not have done it that way. I would have announced what the provisions are.
It feels very much like it's a poll. It's basically the legislature's taking a poll of what voters think about the issue, and then they'll come in maybe later and actually tell us what this constitutional amendment means, which is a remarkable departure from how we normally amend the Constitution.
John, is this what they're coming back to town on November 27th to do?
Oh, partially, potentially. I think there are other things up regarding after the election session, but I think it is possible. I think it's likely the voter ID amendment will pass, and the legislature will then pass implementing legislation. I'm not sure I agree with that process either, but I'm not as worried about the outcome because I think it will look very similar to the bill they already passed before. I don't think they're going to go radically different.
Which got struck down by the court.
Well, it did, but it was that, for one thing, that decision should have gone to the Supreme Court where it would have had a different outcome, but that was sabotaged by the Attorney General and the Governor. They prevented that case from actually being heard by the Supreme Court in a way I thought was entirely inappropriate. But voter ID, as Phil said, is fairly common, but there are significant differences in how they're implemented, and in particular, if you allow for provisional ballot to be cast while someone's identity is being checked out, that reduces the chances, it doesn't eliminate it, of a problem.
Tom, give me your money and trust me to do with it what I want to do with it. That's exactly what this amendment. Yeah, trust me to do with it what I want to do with it. That is exactly what this amendment's all about. That's exactly what 5 of these amendments are all about, because there's no legislative meat to the bone whatsoever.
Well, okay, let's talk about that for a little bit. One of these amendments, Rob, they seemed intent on trying to legislate for future sessions of the General Assembly by lowering the cap on income tax. Finally, at the last, the cap was raised from 5.5% to 7%. It's now 10%. How horrible is that legislation, or how good is it?
It's less horrible than it would have been if it was 5.5%. But the point is that this is something that ought to be for the General Assembly to decide. The people that people elect, the legislators that people elect, ought to have the power to decide what the tax structure is. And this is putting an unnecessary hamstring on them, future General Assemblies. And basically what it means is that we'll have higher property taxes, higher sales taxes, because we won't have the flexibility, if need be in a crisis, to raise the income tax.
My father served over there, as did you. There was always the admonition, let's don't hamstring future legislatures' ability to be able to set rates, and this is doing that.
And I don't think this does. I'll be voting.
Oh, good.
I'll be voting for it. I think that's the only way we limit the growth of government is through the Constitution.
Okay.
And lowering it from 10%. It's already a limit. in the Constitution, as I understand it,
It is.
10%.
Yeah.
Lowering it 5.5, I can see how that would cause some heartburn, but 7% I think is very reasonable. And
keep in mind that this legislature is not binding a future legislature. It's putting an item on the ballot. If the voters choose to do so, who is sovereign other than the voters of the state? Who has more right to make this decision?
That's a ponderable question here.
They elect the legislature, yes, but sometimes
Exactly.
they get to make their own voice heard about long-term questions.
All right, so another of the constitutional amendments was Marsy's Law, which has to do with being able to make sure that victims of crimes can be justly compensated. But the last two, I think, are the ones that I would particularly like to talk about. And one of them is the one that establishes the bipartisan State Board of Elections, then turns around and says that not only does that take the authority of appointment away from the government, but some 400 other appointive powers of the government.
By the way,
yeah. That was sort of hidden there in that particular amendment.
Oh, really?
Jim Martin's response to this, we talked about his column in the Charlotte Observer, was "You kill the snake at every opportunity." Cash, what do you think he meant by that?
Not only Jim Martin, but surprise, surprise, Pat McCrory and also Governor Hunt too said, don't buy this. Look, you have to look at all 6 amendments in totality, and what the Republicans have done is they put some good things up there that they feel are good, at least, and they put some things up there to draw their base. And by the way, while you're in the voting booth, since you like protecting hunting and fishing, since you want a low tax thing, since you want Marsy's Law and so forth, by the way, also this voter ID thing and something else, vote for that as well. Trust us. If you like us on those items, you'll like us on everything else as well. That's their scheme.
I personally think this was the most obvious mistake that they made on these amendments. The bipartisan elections board thing, whether you like it or not, it probably the voters think that that's a good idea. It's similar to the way the Federal Elections Commission is set up. I think there's some pros and cons to that. But when you attach this other item, which fundamentally rebalances the separation of powers in a way that makes the legislature not just supreme but ultra supreme, I think that is not something that was done in a deliberative fashion. I don't have any problem with legislative supremacy as the norm in most state governments. You know, the president is different from a governor. The president commands troops into combat. The governor doesn't have to be as powerful as the legislature at the state level, but the governor needs to have some powers.
You sat in the office beside the governor for many years. I want your comment on this.
Our governor office is still among the weakest in the
weakest in the.
And I happen to have been there and co-managed the campaign for gubernatorial succession with Tom Lambeth to get that passed. And then the veto, we were the last state in the country to do the veto. So I normally and will continue to oppose anything, well, I won't say anything, but amendment that takes appointed power away from the governor. And I don't think the governor, I believe in a strong CEO. Whether it's Democrat or Republican or communist, well, I won't go that far. I won't go that far. But I believe in a strong seat.
You misspoke yourself, Mr. Kirk.
Putin may want to come over here and run when he gets in. But I really think we ought to be united on this against taking more power away from.
And this bespeaks the absurdity of the way this was done. The fact that these were all rammed through at the last minute with hardly any process at all. There wasn't a chance for experts to come in and testify, much less for the issue to be debated around the state. I mean, we're talking about altering the fundamentals of our constitutional balance of power and doing it with a snap
debate. But to Cash's point, since there are several of these that have some popular appeal to them, does this mean the whole package of 6 of them is going to pass, Cash?
Well, it has a good possibility. I mean, if you listen to the debate on the House floor regarding the constitutional amendment to protect hunting and fishing, and I think it was Vernon Ensko who stood up and said, excuse me, nobody is against hunting and fishing. And that's the point. These people stood up and said, but one day, the way these liberals are going, someone's going to stand up and say, I'm against hunting and fishing. We better make sure that in North Carolina, we protect that here.
John, are they going to pass?
I think they will probably all pass.
And does that mean that we're going to have court cases following them?
Only if there's some obvious ambiguity about the language. I mean, you don't get a constitutional amendment cannot be unconstitutional.
So then, okay, but to follow your point,
There are some questions of ambiguity sometimes.
But to follow your point, doesn't that then mean that whoever is controlling the Supreme Court of North Carolina might have some say as to the Constitution?
That is absolutely the case, and we've seen some people sort of hope that the North Carolina Supreme Court will throw a series of Hail Mary passes. I think the recent session of the Supreme Court illustrates that is not likely.
A state constitutional amendment can definitely be unconstitutional. Amendment 1 was unconstitutional.
Against the federal constitution,
against the
not
federal,
the state
right,
constitution.
Exactly. So who knows? There could be lots of federal court litigation.
Okay, so
there is no way the federal constitution forbids North Carolina from protecting the right to hunt or fish, or the right, or to put a tax cap.
But the voter ID amendment, in the way it's
that
implemented,
is highly unlikely, given that voter IDs are usually upheld by the federal courts.
Let's move on to some of the other things that were done in this short session. Cash, we saw the legislature reject 4 of Governor Cooper's appointees. Now, I went back and tried to search my feeble memory database. I can't ever remember that many gubernatorial appointees being rejected, and some of them were for very unusual reasons. For instance, J.B. Buxton, who was education advisor to Governor Easley and had been a DPI executive for many years, was rejected with no reason.
I'll go you one better. Brian Beatty, who was the Secretary of Crime Control and Public Safety. Nothing, no reason whatsoever. The governor put a white female, a white male, and Brian Beatty up for a special superior courtship. Appointed the white female and the white male. Nothing about Brian Beatty whatsoever, and his jacket was clear as far as experience is concerned.
Robert Harris, who was appointed to the Industrial Commission, did not get approved also.
Ron, go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's part of the same story of seizing power from the governor making a statement that we're in charge here.
Brian Beatty's from Salisbury, so his father was a professor at Livingstone, and so you know he's okay being from Salisbury. Second, I hired J.B. Buxton to be the lobbyist.
Was the problem.
That's right. I ruined his kiss of death. I hired him to be the lobbyist for the State Board of Education many years ago. He has participated in some partisan issues that I think were, but let me say, I've always believed the governor should have the right to appoint whoever he or she wants to, unless they're a criminal, or if you disagree with them for being too liberal, too conservative, that's not grounds for
too Republican or too Democrat.
You could maybe not confirm if it wasn't just criminal, but maybe concerns about their management in a previous job or something like that. But you need to let the governor have policy-making authority.
Well, didn't you find it sort of interesting that Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger said, well, we might have treated this a little bit differently had Governor Cooper come over and consulted with us? What?
They've just been playing this game, even before Cooper took office, of course. They've been trying to take away his powers. They've been trying to muscle him out of the way. And
I think that's true, but as a practical matter, at this point, I would advise the governor to consult with the legislative leaders with his appointees.
Well, do you think there's any chance in the world that anybody that Governor Cooper wants to appoint, this legislature is going to like?
Of course, they have confirmed. They have confirmed a number of Governor Cooper's appointments. I'm not defending. I don't know why these decisions were made.
He made these appointments in April of last year.
As a practical matter, that is probably the best strategy Cooper has.
All right, let's run through some of the other things the legislature did, because I do want to get to this judicial topic. The Farm Bill, which Governor vetoed, was overridden. Heroin and opioid addiction, classes for gifted students that come from disadvantaged homes. The municipal charter schools was one that really struck my attention, Phil. Giving municipalities, particularly in Mecklenburg County, the ability to start their own charter schools. Some say this is going to lead to resegregation. What do you think?
Well, I've been a supporter of charter public schools as long as they're under the State Board of Education from the very beginning. I'm also very excited about what the legislature did for Rowan Salisbury schools, of where they're going to have an entire charter district as an experiment, and all their schools are going to be operated as charter schools under the school board and the superintendent. So I think that's got a lot of promise. I'm glad they're only doing it in one county, one system.
I think that unfortunately this was an inevitable consequence of not thinking through how large these urban systems have gotten. They should have thoughtfully and carefully divided these districts into reasonable sizes. thus avoiding some of the problems that will come
and we've
from
talked
having
about
a
that many
municipality have its own school district.
Well, okay, since the Supreme Court ruled that there weren't going to be any judicial primaries this year, the filing period for seats on the bench has ended, and all eyes now are shifting to November's elections. Rob Schofield, with no judicial primaries, many were concerned that there were going to be a large number of people from both parties filing to run for the 1 Supreme Court and 3 Court of Appeals races. Tell us how that turned out and why.
Well, surprisingly, or at least somewhat encouragingly, we're not having a dozen candidates running for each office, as had been the great fear. But we have had, sort of ironically, this last-minute development of a candidate, a couple of candidates coming forward, particularly at the Supreme Court level, a Republican, or I should say a recently becoming Republican by the name of Chris Anglin, who's decided to run and make it a 3-person race with 2 Republicans, the incumbent Barbara Jackson against the challenger Anita Earls. And Republicans are crying foul. Dallas Woodhouse, the chair, or the Republican Party executive director, has been screaming about it and saying that this is no good.
And this is the strangest. This judicial filing thing has been the strangest we've had.
It is obviously a Democratic plot. So that part of Dallas's complaint is correct.
Evidence.
The evidence is pretty overwhelming that it's Democratic plot. However, whose fault is it?
Right.
I mean,
why didn't the
if you have
Republicans get a
No, wait a
bunch?
minute. John's getting ready to make a very good point.
If you had a partisan election in the November, you should have party primaries.
Exactly.
They didn't have party primaries, which is how you ended up with both in a Court of Appeals race and a Supreme Court race, 2 R's and a D. If you had had party primaries along with all the other races, then you'd only have 1 R and 1 D. This is not complicated.
It kind of backfired on them, didn't it, Cash?
Yeah, and I feel for my old friend Dallas Woodhouse, but that's the way the cookie crumbles when you play this game.
Well, and it's been this chaotic process of, well, we're going to redistrict the courts. We're going to have appointment of judges by the legislature. They couldn't make up their mind, so we've got to cancel all these primaries. It's just a result of a bit of a chaotic approach to trying to redo our judiciary.
So at the end of the day, let's talk particularly about the Supreme Court Barbara Jackson seat, because what you've ended up with is 2 Republicans running against a Democrat here, and of course the Republican incumbent is Barbara Jackson. Does that give Anita Earls an advantage here?
I think the fact that, well, you have 2 females running, and that throws another angle in. I'm not quite sure what, except they run very well. But I don't know how they're going to do in the divide. I don't know the answer to that, but it gives the Democrat the better chance when Republicans are going to divide the vote.
Okay, so for the John Arrowwood seat, you had 1 Democrat, 1 Republican. The Calabria seat, you had 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. The Elmore seat, you had a Republican, a Democrat, and a Libertarian. But there are all kinds of shenanigans, John. You've eliminated, you pointed out some of this stuff. We had groups encouraging Democrats to run so as to help Republicans win.
Right.
Then we had a Democrat actually paying the filing fee for a Republican to run so that it would split the vote there.
There were Republican plots and Democratic plots. Only some worked.
I mean, you just need a scorecard
we
to
shouldn't
keep up
have
with all
had
this.
Kind of, as we said earlier, this process makes no sense. I am fine with a partisan election of judges or some kind of appointive system, but make it consistent, make it logical, and know the rules going in.
And speaking of elections, it's time for me to ask each of you to tell us something we don't know. Cash Michaels, let me start with you.
I will be going to Charlottesville on the weekend of August 11th, August 12th for the first anniversary of the tragedy there in reference to my film.
All right. John Hood.
Governing Magazine did a recent analysis of local tax incentives given across the country and found that cities that have high inequality tend to give the largest amounts of economic incentives, and also they tend to be cities that are struggling. By the way, North Carolina not high in the ranking of incentive granting, at least at the local level.
All right, Rob Schofield, tell us something we don't know.
Our Joe Killian reported this week that there is a commission that a lot of people aren't familiar with of Elaine Marshall, Josh Stein, and Paul Coble, the Legislative Services Chair, who will be making a decision about some of the language that these constitutional amendments will, what will actually be on the ballot. They'll have something to say about that language.
Interesting. Phil Kirk.
I spoke to Charlotte Rotary Club last week, and they have 2 honorary members, Jim Martin and Pat McCrory. When I got up to speak, I asked if honorary members had to pay for their meals, and I was told that they didn't, and I was concerned because I thought I might have to buy their meals. I haven't. Governors typically do not pay for their own meals, even former governors.
and that comment comes from Phil Kirk, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, and not
the rest of us disavow it.
Yeah.
I didn't say those two, I said governors.
All right.
All governors.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
From treating the newest member of your family to helping a loved one make end-of-life decisions, your family physician is with you every step, for every stage of life, for every member of your family. Despite a healthcare landscape fraught with potential landmines, family physicians across North Carolina are providing you a lifetime of committed, dependable medical care. Family Physicians, your trusted healthcare advisor for life.
Quality of life enjoyed by North Carolinians comes from the sacrifice of our state and local government retirees. These men and women risked their lives in times of danger. They taught our children, kept our neighborhoods clean, and protected the state's resources. They are North Carolina's silent heroes. The North Carolina Retired Governmental Employees Association proudly serves as the voice for more than 300,000 retirees across North Carolina. Our retirees deserve no less, and every day we stand by them.
Agriculture. It's North Carolina's #1 economic driver. It puts people to work. It powers our economy. And as agriculture grows, so does our quality of life. North Carolina Farm Bureau is proud to support agriculture and our farmers because agriculture connects us all.
North Carolina Channel is made possible by the financial contributions of viewers like you who support the UNC TV network.